Today we're going to start talking about coil pots and how to make them. So here you're going to see I'm going to grab a ball of clay and start rolling it into a coil. This is going to be a lot harder than you think it is. What's important here is to use the fingertips to the base of your fingers. Don't use your palm, just your fingertips, and roll all the way. So it's making a complete rotation. Once you get it long enough, I'd suggest using two hands. What you're going to see is it'll stop the clay from flopping back and forth and breaking apart. Put nice and even pressure and just keep rolling it out. If you get some high spots or spots that aren't completely round, just kind of stop and round them back out. This is where you're going to spend most of your time, is making that nice round coil. I made that look super easy, but I've done it a lot. Okay, so once you get a coil rolled out, then you're going to create a base. Now to do this base, I'm just taking some clay and I'm smashing it out flat as I can, and then I'm just going to throw it on the table. And now this throwing isn't really throwing straight down, it's kind of like rolling it. So I'm going to drop one edge and pull it towards me. What that does is it really stretches out the clay. You can kind of see how it kind of rolls a little bit. So it's not going straight down. It looks like I'm throwing it really hard. I'm really not. I'm kind of just dropping it and pulling the one edge of the clay. That's a nice, easy way to flatten out your clay. Or you can use a rolling pin, whatever you want. Then at this point, I'm just taking a spray bottle and I'm getting one of my wood tools and I'm just kind of cleaning it up a little bit, and then I'm just going to burnish that side of the clay, in other words, smooth it out. So I'm just going over it, making sure there's no cracks in it, kind of compacting that clay down. So then here you can see how that smooths out versus the other side. So there's little cracks in it. So I'm just going to repeat and do the other side as well. Kind of helps that clay be a little stronger and hold together. Now I'm just going to use the bottom of my spray bottle as kind of a guide to make a nice circle. How big this is really depending on how big of a coil pot you want to make. So I just kind of traced it, and now I'm going back through and I'm actually cutting the clay out. I like to trace it first just to make sure it's correctly done, and then I go and cut all the way through. It's a little easier without that bottle in the way to cut. So now we're just going to take a coil and we're going to slip it on there. Many of you have probably heard that you need to score and slip clay. That's really not true with wet clay. So you're going to notice I don't do that at all. It saves you some time. I just wrap that coil around it, and then I'm going to cut it out so it fits. So you can see here up close, I'm just going to cut it. I kind of overlapped the coil a little bit, so I was cutting two pieces. That allows those ends to meet perfectly. See right there, they just meet perfectly in there, and I'm going to then just kind of connect that clay together. This is the process you're going to use really for the whole pot. Right there, I'm just connecting the ends of the coil together so it looks like it's just one rope, an endless seam of rope. And now I'm just kind of using my thumb there to pull that coil down and connect it to my base. It looks pretty ugly right now. That's fine. I'm just connecting it, and then I'm going to smooth that out in a second. So we just keep going around, getting that coil all the way connected and making sure that it's well connected. I suggest doing this every coil, every other coil. One of the big problems we see is people waiting a long time, so they'll get their whole thing done, not connect the coils, then as it dries, it falls apart. So here I just added a little bit of water to my fingers. I just dipped my fingers in water and smoothed out that clay. Now I'm going to add another coil on top. And I just repeat this process until I have the shape or the height and size that I'm looking for. Now I'm going to use my finger and just smooth out the inside of that coil as well. So you can see I'm just doing the same exact thing. I'm just pulling the inside down and connecting that whole coil both inside and outside. So here I'm just adding just a teeny bit of water to my fingers and going around and now smoothing out those areas that I connected together. Like I said, I just dip my fingers in the water and go around and smooth out those edges. Now I'm just making another coil. I'm going to add a little different part to my coil vase. So I'm rolling this coil out a little thinner. I don't want it quite as thick as my other coils, just for the design I'm going with. So I'm rolling them out, and then I notice there's a little crack in it. So I take the time to fix that crack now. So I'm just adding a teeny bit of water to my fingers, smoothing that clay out. And now I'm just going to come in and cut these coils. I'm going to kind of stack them next to each other. So I'm just using that coil to measure so I get them all about the same length. I'm not going exact, but pretty close. So I'm just going to cut them, and then I'm going to end up connecting them together. So I just use the side of my needle, or a toothpick would work just fine, and I'm just lightly pressing in between those coils to connect them. And then on the back of it, I decide, you know what, I don't really need the coil shape, and I want it to be really strong and well connected, so I'm just smoothing that clay on the back all together. So you don't really see the coils, and now I'm just trimming the edges just to get them squared up so they're all exactly the same length now. And you're going to see I have coils and they're well connected. So now I'm just using the side of my needle to kind of redraw those lines in from where the coils are separated. Sometimes as you smash it, those lines disappear. Next, I'm going to attach it, and you can see this time I'm going with vertical coils. Coils can really be used any way you want. It's just a process of adding clay. So I'm going to use the coils as kind of my design. So I just put some together, and I'm going to have them go vertical here. Again, redraw in where those lines should be, since I smoothed them out a little bit. Now the back of it, I'm going to go ahead and connect it as well. Just moving that clay around. Now sometimes you'll find that it's just not connecting very well. You need a little extra clay. So here what I'm doing, I'm just rolling out a thin piece of clay, just a little tiny coil, and I'm going to connect it into this on the back side. So I just kind of cut off the excess, and then I'm just going to go in, you can see the coil there, and I'm just going to smash that little coil into the vertical coils and the base of my coil pot. Just connect them really well here, and move on to my next step. This next step is going to be, I'm going to make a little ball to go on either side of these. So I just took a little bit of my coil, cut off a little chunk, and I'm just going to roll it around in my hands to create a little bit of a ball. I'm going to put a ball on either side of those vertical coils. You can see here I have that little ball. I'm going to attach it on there and make sure it's connected well, and just make sure it's a little round. There's no cracked clay in it, so if there is, you just kind of smooth it out a little bit. Set it on there, and then I'm going to connect it. Okay, so now we're going to work on making your pot a little bit wider. So to do that, all you have to do is put that coil on that outside edge of the previous coil. You can kind of see, you can see most of that coil that was on there before. So you just put it a little on the outside and then connect that coil together. Now I'm just using a wood tool, or what would work as a popsicle stick, just to smooth that out so it looks a little cleaner and I don't see my fingerprints or where I press that clay together. So again, if you just want to get wider, you just keep adding it a little bit further on the outside of the previous coil. And now I'm just going to go through and kind of clean up my coils on the outside and make sure they're connected. So I'm just using, again, this wood tool, or your popsicle stick would work. And I'm just kind of lightly pressing between those two coils and connecting them together. So I do that, and it keeps that coil look, but it helps connect the coils so they stay connected. So here I'm going to add a little bit more of a detail into it, just change things up a little bit so it's not just a round coil, that's boring. So I'm making this little spiral, and it's going to connect on there. And again, that was just a coil. I just made it a little thinner, rolled it up, and now I'm connecting it onto my vase. I'm going to make a series of these. I make a couple of them, some really small, all little different sizes, get them connected in there. And I'm just using that tool again, the wood tool, and my needle, whichever one fits in, sometimes my fingers, just to get in there and connect it together. Now I'm going to clean it up with my sponge a little bit, just any balled up pieces of clay that'll wipe it off. So there you can kind of quickly saw how I added those. Now I'm adding another kind of coil, almost like a wave to it, just to change things up, have some variety in my piece so it's not all the same. And I'm just connecting those. All I did was make a coil and kind of folded it around on itself, connected it together and put another coil on top of that, and then just using my sponge to clean it up. You see there's my spirals, and I'm kind of getting into something like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some more like stacked coils together. But before I do that, I'm just cleaning it up, making sure it's all well connected and nice and clean before I move on to my next step. That's a little time tedious. So here it is. I have those coils I cut out, connected them together, and now I'm just kind of squaring off the edges of them. Just kind of cut them, and I'm going to stick it right next to that. Now I could have done these individually, but it was just faster to kind of connect them together first, and then I just used the wood tool or your popsicle stick to connect that coil to the previous one just by lightly drawing it in there. Then I kind of switched to using the edge of my needle. I'm not using the tip of it, I'm using the edge, and just kind of lightly pressing them down and dragging that needle across to connect them together. And then I'm switching over to that wood tool again. Again, your popsicle stick or anything like onto it, a ruler, will work just as good. And I'm just connecting, moving that clay around, getting those coils all connected so that they don't come apart. Now I just clean it up with my sponge a little bit. Cleaning it as you go I think is really helpful. You want to make sure it doesn't get too dry. Now I'm just rolling out some other coils, some really small ones to go around the base here. This is going to be my foot. So I'm scoring this, and I'm doing this now because that base has hardened up. It's closer to leather hard. So I score it, I just cut it around a little bit, add some water. Then I'm going to stick this coil around the bottom, just like I've been doing with all my other coils on the whole thing. And then I'm going to connect that coil together so it's one piece. Right there you can kind of see that coil was a little dry, so it started to crack. So I just added a little bit of water to my finger and I kind of smoothed that crack out. Now I'm just using that tool again to push the clay down on the inside of the coil to the bottom of the pot, going all the way around and making sure it's well connected. And then I just kind of use that to start smoothing it out, grab my sponge and finish smoothing it out. And then go around that whole bottom coil, make sure there's no cracks in it. It looks nice and clean. And then I'm using that tool again to draw my coil line in, which kind of connects it in there and makes it one piece again. Just kind of clean it up, and then we have our finished coil project. So this took me approximately 3 hours to make. I would expect that to take you guys probably a little bit longer. There was still some more cleanup that I needed to get done on it that I just didn't show you guys because I figured you'd be bored with it. But I'm looking for nice and smooth. I don't see fingerprints or where you connected your coils. It should look nice and professionally made. You should also have a variation of textures, designs into it. I want to see coils on there, so I need to see them either on the inside or the outside. You can see on mine I kind of did a little bit of both. The very base looked completely smooth, and then as I moved up you saw more of those coils. I just want to see that you use coils to make it, but try to make it unique and different. Your coils could be part of your texture design. You can see I did that. I added some coils on there going different directions, made some kind of design out of them. That's perfectly fine. Have fun with it and just don't get too frustrated.